Kia ora tātou. First point I would like to make is that for care and support workers, this matter is urgent. This is about equity, but it's also about material hardship. It's about children not being able to play sport because care and support workers can't afford shoes. It's about having to choose between rent and power. It's about having bald tyres that you can't afford to replace. And so it is urgent. And it is not just about what is right, but it is about what is required to have a decent life. I also want to make the point that the Supreme Court, and Muriel will talk more about this in a minute, the Supreme Court, which is a body that exists to be impartial, ruled that care and support work is undervalued because it's female dominated, and that that work has value, that it's highly skilled, it's extremely responsible, it's difficult, and that what it does is it gives vulnerable people in our community dignity, and that has been undervalued for way too long. And my final point before I hand over to Muriel that I'd like to make is that this is a collective issue, that you cannot fix pay equity individually, that it needs to be collective, it needs to be sector-wide, and it needs to have independent trade unions representing the voices of the workers who have been undervalued for too long. Kia ora.
Kia ora anō, ka nui te mihi ki a koutou ki te whakarongo mai tēnā koutou. So the original reason for the Service and Food Workers Union, now E2, who took the pay equity case on behalf of Christine Bartlett, was after more than 30 years of frustration about the low wages of care and support workers. And these issues were not being resolved at the bargaining table or during collective bargaining. Christine won her case against her employer, Terra Nova, despite Terra Nova having initially tried to dismiss the case as frivolous and vexatious. Christine won the support of thousands of care and support workers. She would say she didn't do that on her own. It took all of us. And as you know, Christine was humble, and she went on to become New Zealander of the Year. I was in Parliament with Christine each time to see the introduction and passing of the bill, later to become the Support Workers Pay Equity Settlements Act in 2017, and I acknowledge some of you were there at the time. This bill, which put into law a settlement negotiated by E2, PSA and NZNO and the government, was passed unanimously by all political parties. There was huge cheers in the House and the public gallery. The outcome was that 65,000 predominantly low-paid women workers had between 25 to 50% wage increases, and a new qualification system that recognised the skills these workers used in their mahi. The phased-in period for this expired in 2022. The government extended the legislation in 2022 for another 18 months with a 3% increase to the wage rates. But with the expiry of the Act in December 2023, the minimum rates and qualifications expired too. Since July 2022, the unions have been trying hard to renew the settlement, but without success. Sadly, these workers' hopes have now been extinguished by this current government's decision, and the lives of these predominantly undervalued and underpaid working women have all been shattered. Finally, I'd like to acknowledge the gender pay gap for Māori and Pacific women is much worse than those for Pākehā working women because of the allocation of the workforce, such as care and support work. Nō reira, me aro ki te hā o hene ahu one, pay heed to the mana and dignity of all women. Nō reira, tēnā tātou. And I'm going to hand over to Melissa from PSA. Oh, sorry.
We've changed place.
Kia ora.
Kia ora. My part of the presentation, we heard that you were taking the submission as read, but we particularly wanted to draw attention to the timeline. As Muriel just said, as soon as it was possible for us to raise a claim for this group of workers, we did so on the 1st of July 2022, which is just 3 years just passed when you think about it that way. You will see by our timeline that every opportunity was used in order to progress this claim. We believe we did that jointly with the employers, the 15 parties that we work with, and listening to our sisters from the education sector. A lot of what they said to you we experienced as well, in terms of the hours that were put into talking, to working through all of the interviews, all of that stuff that we did, and it was robust, and it was very accurate. We made pains to make sure that all the way through, reminding ourselves that we didn't want to get to the end of a process and be challenged by anything that we hadn't paid due attention to. So you can see that our work with our members, all the interviews, all the conversations we had right through to when we were subject to the milestone reports, they were key when we had to work through those as well to move on to the next stage. All of that was done with what we believe incredibly due diligence to make sure that things were right. And, you know, we were at the stage that the amendments came through, were just with the employment authority waiting to have a determination heard. It's really frustrating, and my colleague Melissa will talk more about the impact and the recommendations that occurred as part of that process, but it was, as far as we're concerned, every step in that journey has been documented, and it involved the hopes and dreams of a lot of people who were covered by the claim.